Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today, I have me a very special guest, Scott Sigler. Scott, how are you doing today?
Doing great, man. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for being flexible. I have a small child and 3 jobs, so it's been a wild, wild spring and summer. I'm actually excited because you're actually one of 2 interviews I get to do today, and then I actually had like 2 or 3 next week. So I'm like, have had almost like a 3.5 week break, and it's like weird. My wife, she just left. We worked together in summer school. She's like, "You're probably ready, right?" I'm like, "I am very ready to talk to somebody else about books," because she doesn't really want to talk too much about them. So especially fantasy and sci-fi. So I understand, but I really appreciate you coming on today and letting me pick your brain, and we get to talk about some of your products today. So I'm really excited about that. Thank you so much.
I'm pumped.
Yeah, let's do it. So we'll go right there with that first question. It was actually given to me, I guess, about 2 years ago, 2.5 now. What has your writing journey been like up until this point?
My writing journey is a little bit unusual in that I've been a full-time writer now for, I think, 20 years.
Oh, wow.
And started because I started podcasting my own stories back in 2005. And I was going to all the cons, and back in the days of actually sending out paper manuscripts, using my work's postage meter and copy machine and sending out all the manuscripts, trying to find an agent, trying to find a publisher, doing all the stuff that people still do today. But back then there wasn't as many options for that. Didn't have any luck, banged away at that for about 12 years, kept getting told people liked my work, but they didn't know what shelf to put it on. That was a big phrase back then. You either were a thriller writer, a sci-fi writer, or a horror writer. You were not all three things at once. And then I learned about podcasting back in 2005, before it was on the iTunes store, before it was anywhere, and happened to be working for a company that did a lot of audio work, and was able to go in at 3 o'clock in the morning when no one was there and learn how to do an RSS feed and learn how to record. Was able to put up a book called Earth Core, and that book did extremely well. At one point, it was getting like 50,000 listens a week, and it was doing great. And then we put out a second one called Ancestor. Now, I read all of these. I did all the editing. I had to learn on the fly, jump in the deep end of the pool. And when we almost finished with Ancestor, about 4 episodes from the end, we put it up for sale on Amazon as a trade paperback. And it went to #1 in sci-fi, #1 in horror on Amazon. It was the #2 fiction book overall on Amazon, behind Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, I believe. So when that happened, I also had a new agent, and that new agent was putting a book of mine called Infected on desks of editors who'd never heard about me. New York lost their little minds, and Infected went into a bidding war. And that happened because I asked all of my podcast listeners, hey, on April 1st, 2007, could you guys go buy this book? And it just shot to the top of the charts. And this is before ebooks, which is really important to note, because now there's a lot of people who are very good at marketing ebooks and writing quickly and putting out a lot of ebooks and working the algorithm, which we're terrible at. We're terrible at selling ebooks. Good at audiobooks, terrible at ebooks. So this was going head to head in print against the Stephen Kings and the Danielle Steeles. And we were, #1 in those charts. That led to the auction. And then I wound up signing a 5-book deal with Penguin Random House, and put out a series called the Infected Trilogy, which was Infected, Contagious, and Pandemic. They brought Earth Core and they brought Ancestor back. We took that off the market. They put it out. We put out a 5th book called Nocturnal, and all of that led to where I am today. And today I still podcast fiction every Sunday. I do a live read every Wednesday. Take that audio, rip it, edit it, put that in the podcast feed. So we've had a podcast feed with fiction going every Sunday for 20 years now. It's the world's longest running fiction podcast. We're very proud of that, and we've got a bunch of happy listeners.
Wow, that's incredible. That's a lot of really cool stuff right there. I was gonna say, when I looked up Infected actually on your website, I was like, oh my gosh, like I actually remember my friend handing me the paperback actually a while ago, and I was like, oh, this really looks like the same thing. And as I was going in with the blurb and stuff, I was like, this is definitely the book that my friend was like raving about. So I thought that was really, really cool, kind of serendipitous there that we're talking today. So that was really awesome. I'm just curious, so so where did you first hear about podcasting then, like in particular? Do you remember? Or?
I absolutely remember. So I'll make this long story as short as I can. I worked for a company called SNP Communications in San Francisco. And what they did is their approach was if you have a city of 20,000 people, you've probably got a couple of newspapers, a couple of radio stations. You've got all this mass media to cater to that demographic, that population. Well, Sun Microsystems and Apple and Fortune 500 companies have 15 to 30,000 employees. And their great idea was, we're going to be a media company for the Fortune 500 companies. And they hired a bunch of former journalists, of which I was one. We would do what's called a pre-interview. So I would call like the guy who sold the most widgets in Europe. And then we'd call the lady who handled distribution in the Southwest, do an interview, boil that down to little bullet points. And then Scott McNeely or Steve Jobs would come into our studio, sit down, and be able to ask these questions. And because the little bullet points just kind of a springboard for them, it sounded like a Larry King show. It sounded very natural. And it was a way of being a radio station for Sun Microsystems, all very internal, which meant they had all kinds of recording gear there. And back then we were actually sending stuff out on cassette tapes. That's how long ago it was. Well, as the marketing guy there, I started looking for ways to improve the company and learned about podcasting back when Adam Curry and Dave Weiner were doing it. And I started to research that. And what I found was back in I think it was the 50s, transistor radios showed up. And a transistor radio was the small handheld device that you listened to with little earbuds. And on it, you could get content you couldn't get anywhere else. And at that time, that content was rock and roll music on FM radio. So the transistor was where you got FM. Rock came at FM. So sold 50,000 units the first year transistor. The next year was 600,000 units. The next year was like 7 million units. So I saw a parallel between the iPod and the transistor radio. I got very excited, and I'm like, if I can learn how to record a book, and if somebody could serialize a book, it'd be like the radio dramas of the 40s and 50s, The Phantom, The Lone Ranger, things like that. These hugely popular shows, these worldwide phenomenons back then when radio was all you could get. I started Googling for serialized audiobooks to listen to, couldn't find any. After a couple of days, I realized it's not because I didn't know how to Google, it was because nobody had done it yet. So I happened to be at the right place at the right time. I knew that the iPod was going to absolutely blow up based on what I saw of the transistor radio, because the number one radio format at that time when the iPod came out was talk radio. It's still the biggest format for radio there is. So here you've got the iPod, you can get spoken word content. You can listen to it with earbuds. You don't bother anybody. I'm like, this is going to be a very big deal. So I figured out right then, like, I got to figure out how to record an RSS, how to do audio engineering, et cetera. Kind of fumbled my way into it. And the last part of that was, as a marketing guy, I had a pretty good idea how to market this stuff. There was very few people in the podcast space at that time. It's not like, and there was nobody doing audiobooks in the podcast space except for a site called the Dragon Page, with two other gentlemen, two more putting their stuff out. So I was like, if I can push people if I can dare them to listen for 4 episodes, it's free. And then once I've got them, push them like, this is free. Share this with all your friends. Post this on Reddit. Post this on dig.com. Share it everywhere. And I was in the right place at the right time and knew what I was doing. Those things combined, I was able to kind of make it blow up and get some crazy download numbers right out of the gate. And too, because people, it was a crappy story, but this was when Lost and 24 were the biggest shows on television. So the market was very hungry for long form serialized dramas. It wasn't like CSI where it ends every episode. You can watch them out of order. It doesn't matter. You had to watch the whole season of Lost to know what was going on. You had to watch the whole season of 24 to appreciate the arc. So that fit very well with 100 and 120,000 word novel, which Earth Core and Ancestor were. And it kind of blew up. And then that led to what I mentioned earlier, when Infected went into auction, and then New York Publishing kicked in from there and kind of went hand in glove from there.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, I'd say talk about a great idea and then strike it when the iron's hot, right? Like that's really awesome. That's like I was trying to explain that to my friend recently. Like he had a viral post and stuff, and I was like, well, you gotta go, And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, everybody's eyes are on you right now. I'm like, you got to be posting in that chat, in that comment section, I'm like, when the lightning strikes, I'm like, you got to really milk it, right? And he did a really good job. He went from, I think, like 7,500 followers or something like that, well past 10K. I mean, he milked that post as much as possible. Tried to, recreate lightning twice in the same spot, didn't quite work. But I told him, I was like, now you got over 10K followers, right? I said, now that's when, you start to go, you start to make them into fans. I said, this should be like, your primary, way to advertise your books now. Like, you don't go to Facebook, like your Facebook isn't as popular, but you go, to this site, this app, and, this is where, this should be your home now. So he's done a really good job of, trying to capitalize, but that's really smart.
Because social media changes. At one time I had 1,000 followers on Twitter. I'm not really on Twitter anymore. Tumblr was really big for some authors. They based their whole platform on Tumblr and did really well until Tumblr changed. And even when I started out, there were people doing wonderful things on YouTube, great entertainment, very engaging, smart, hardworking, worked all day on their stuff, edited. But it was, these were kind of one-off videos for the most part, or people telling you about their day. That wasn't for me, because I'm like, if I tell a story, people will come back and listen to that story 10, 20, 30 years from now. I don't know that people will go back and watch what you did during your day, all those thousands of episodes 20 years from now. So that was more temporary content. I've always been angling for, this is long form fiction. It's a bookshelf. You can always grab it. And, if you discover noir fiction right now and go back, and there's dozens of authors that were hugely popular, all of those works are sitting there, and you can go back and read them all and tear through them. So my sweet spot is the long form storytelling, or short stories, which are dominating the podcast space right now, or the full cast podcast, which are just crushing it, like Old Gods of Appalachia, Dark Dice, things like that. People will be able to find those 15 years from now and sit down and listen to that whole thing and still be absolutely entertained, because it's a book.
Yeah, that's like I think like I had a couple kids. I teach high school. I have a couple kids. They came up to me like, you write fantasy and like sci-fi and stuff. I'm like, yeah. They're like, have you ever heard of Critical Role? And I just like laughed. I was like, yes. I was like, did you just discover it? They're like, yes. And I just think it's hilarious. Like, okay, he's like, I got through like first two seasons or something in like, like one day or something. And I was just like, I agree. I was like, it's funny when people find those things. I love that when I find an author like that though, where I'm like, oh, people maybe told me I should have read them or something. And like Malazan took me a long time. My best friend and I book clubbed it together. And we like flew through it in like 2 years. I know that sounds weird, but it's a lot of words, right? You could kill someone with a paperback there, right? But like, it's always nice, right, to discover, a new author, a new world, and just, to just be able to dive in, right? So I totally agree with you. It's really awesome when you can have those types of experience, or when you find a really good show, right? You're like, oh, I didn't have time to watch it. It's got 5 seasons. You just like fly through it. It's a really good feeling, right, when you match what somebody's writing. So I think that's totally a good point. So we talked a little bit about it, but let's get a little bit more specific. What genre or genres do you currently write in, and why?
I primarily write in I call it hard science horror. So I'm using real science, real genetics, real physics to create kind of a Stephen King-ish, dark, visceral horror story. So it's mostly science gone wrong, or science manipulated wrong kind of things. And that's Earthcore and Mount Fitzroy, which is Sun Symbol Duology. That's the Infected Trilogy. That's Ancestor. That's Nocturnal. Nocturnal's heavily into mutations and genetics. So not science gone wrong, it's nature having gone wrong. And then I have recently moved into what is more pure urban fantasy. So now I'm writing one called Slay. That's the one we podcast every week. And we're closing in the end of season 3. We finish a season, we go to work putting that out as a print book, an audiobook, and as an ebook. And that's been really fun. So that's, Rust Belt, inner city, monster hunters fighting or chasing down monsters to get money, not for altruistic reasons. So it's very cash oriented. That's the title, Slay. It's a $ for the Slay. It's been very fun because it doesn't require as much research. The hard science stuff, I talk to PhDs in biology. I talk to people who've served in the armed forces. I talk to firefighters, cops. I talk to doctors, all these people. Like, I want to get it as right as I can get it. When you move into urban fantasy, as long as you're internally consistent, you don't need to do as much off-page stuff, which makes it's a bit more fun to write. And so that's my first dive into ghosts and goblins and things of that nature. The biggest series I have, though, is a very strange one. It is sci-fi set against the backdrop of sports, and it's the Galactic Football League. So that is an American pro football league, 700 years in the future, with aliens playing different positions based on their physiology. Because my aliens are not, oh, they've got blue skin and bumps in their noses, but they're basically human. My aliens are crazy. They've all got their own evolutionary tree. They look completely different, and they all can do different things. So one species can jump 20 feet in the air and runs very fast. Those are the receivers and defensive backs. Another species has an extra set of arms and can roll to the side, and they're very powerful. So those tend to be the linebackers. These massive organisms are offensive and defensive line. And for storytelling purposes, our skill players, the running backs and the quarterbacks and some of the defense players, those are humans. So I can tell a human-centric story. But it's a space opera quest series. It's a man after a goal, and right now it's heading into its 7th book. It just happens to be set against the backdrop of football. So we get a lot of sports drama in it, but it'd be very familiar. I call it Star Wars meets Any Given Sunday meets The Godfather. There's a lot of organized crime in it. So what genre is, I don't know, because no one's done anything like this before. So I guess I call it sci-fi sports, but it's also got a lot of crime and noir elements to it as well.
That's awesome. When you sent it to me, I was like, yeah, this is my type of thing. Because I love when people take different things like that I'm interested in, whether it's, I used to play football, used to coach football. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I love sports, I love competition. And then I'm like in space, and you had me at Any Given Sunday. So I just think it's such a cool, conglomeration there. And like Michael was like, hey, I think you would like this. I'm like, yeah, this sounds really awesome. So like definitely my type of thing. So I'm excited that, you have that many of them, because it's definitely going to be one of my types of series. So
This series has been an effort too. I had a lot of hubris when I started this out because I'm a jock nerd, right?
Mm.
I was a football player who would on the sidelines be talking about our D&D adventure coming up on the weekend, and leave wrestling practice and go play Champions, the role-playing game. So I was in both of those worlds, and all the science fiction I read, and I read every sports-related science fiction title I could find back then. They were all written by people who just hadn't played sports, and they treated the athletes like dumb jocks. There wasn't a lot of respect for the hard work, the intelligence, and the sacrifices that go into being a player in any sport, not just football. Cheerleading is a massively demanding endeavor, right? That takes a huge amount of time, a huge amount of skill, and a huge amount of practice to get up there. So it's all sports. So I was like, I'm going to write a series that's sci-fi that presents athletes as the hardworking, smart, dedicated people they actually are. Because a lot of my nerd friends hated my jock friends, and I was like, I'm gonna fix this. And I actually thought, I'm like, I know a lot about football. This is gonna be easy. I'm gonna be able to explain in a book to all my nerd friends that football is this really incredibly complex, mathematical, dramatic game that has all these different personalities in it, and so many things have to be right in order to win a game. They'll love it once they understand the basic level of rules. I was wrong about that. I started writing it and because my dad was a football coach, my first memory as a human being is sitting on my dad's knee watching 16mm football film while he scouted for an upcoming game. So there's so much that I have just internalized that I don't even have to think about. When I went back to square one, I'm like, I'm going to through this series, I will gradually teach people the fundamentals of football so that they can watch it on TV and enjoy it if they're into that. It's far more complicated to explain than I thought, but still, each book approaches a different fundamental element of football through the narrative, through the story. So when you come out of it, you know some things. And it's been one of the most satisfying moments of my career. We get emails every Thanksgiving and every Christmas from somebody who's just picked up the series, and they're like, I hate football. I don't like jocks. I don't like this stuff. But for the first time in my life, I sat down on the couch next to my dad and my brother, and we watched football, and we got to experience that together because I knew just enough to be part of the conversation and then just enough to understand what's going on the screen. So this series, it's weird to say, this series has helped bring families together in a different way. It's very satisfying.
that's super cool. I love that you took something, that you knew, and then put it with something, something else and took things you loved and combined them. I think that that's really where people are responding, right? I actually had asked a couple indie friends. I was like, "Hey, I was like, have you checked this series out?" And they're like, "Oh, I'm on book 3. I'm on book 4." And I was like kind of miffed. I was like, "You guys just didn't tell me about it." Like they're like, "Well, to be fair, we talk about a lot of books." They're like, "I'm sorry, I was like reading," and I'm like, "I get like that sometimes too. Like I'm on my current list or something. I forget about the books I just read or something." But that's why now I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to post books that I read, want to read, currently reading, that kind of thing. But I think that's a really cool thing that is happening for you in the series. That's really awesome. I know we talked about, the GFL series a little bit here, how you came up with that idea. So that's awesome. I'm curious, what is your Generations trilogy about, and why should readers go pick that up today?
Generations Trilogy is a 3-book series from Del Rey, and it opens with a girl who thinks it's her 12th birthday, and she wakes up, knows she has to get ready to go to school. She gradually realizes that she is restrained and trapped, and she eventually realizes she's in a coffin. She doesn't remember her name. She doesn't know why she's there. And she goes through a chapter 1 ordeal to get out of that coffin and finds herself in a crypt-like environment with 11 other coffins. And she has no idea what's going on other than she's dressed in a schoolgirl outfit, which is way too small for her. Eventually, she helps the other kids get out of there, at least the ones who are alive, get out of their coffins, and winds up with 6 of them, 3 boys and 3 girls, all of whom are dressed in school uniforms that are too small because they're all actually physically 18, although mentally they're still 12. They've somehow missed 6 years of their life. None of them know what their name is. None of them know why they're there or where they are. And they have to work together to get out of this room and eventually piece together what's going on. And it's a somewhat violent series. I think it's horror. It's YA applicable because there's no cursing in it. It's I put the reader as the 7th person in this group. You're right there with them, and you don't know anything until they learn things. So it's very gripping and visceral. You're right there with them. And by the time you get to book 3, a lot of very interesting things have gone on. It's absolutely sci-fi. I won't give any spoilers to it. But the other interesting thing about that is part of the Siglerverse continuum. So the hard science horror books, Infected Trilogy, Earth Core, Mount Fitzroy, Ancestor, Nocturnal, those are all kind of modern day books. So the day the book is published is the first day in that story. So you gradually follow along 2018, 2020. You don't have to read through all of them. There is a trilogy and a duology, but you can just, if you read through them all, you'll start to see characters repeat, situations repeat, and themes repeat. That is the same timeline 700 years later that the Galactic Football League is in. So you're still seeing some of these through lines through the whole thing. So there's a ton of Easter eggs. So for the people that like to pick up an author and tear through all of their work, it's really fun and satisfying. And the Generations trilogy is in that timeline. I just don't tell anybody when it is, because that will not become apparent until Galactic Football League Book 8 and Book 9. So all of these things are threaded together. But the Generations trilogy is very much an entry point. I think if you like Red Rising, or you like the Hunger Games or Divergent or anything along those lines of young people thrust into a desperate situation and they have to figure out their own way to survive, you'll like that. So that's a great entry point for my particular writing.
Well, it's super cool. I love that whole scenario where, you're with characters and they're trying to figure out, you're trying to figure it out. I loved that Canadian, was it the Sci-Fi show, Dark Matter from Sci-Fi, where that's how they woke up, right? They all wake up. They're like, what are we doing here? Who are we, kind of thing. And over time, as they build back their identity and their memories, like so do you. And I don't know, I always like that form of storytelling, particularly for like sci-fi. I always think that that's really, really interesting. How did you come up with that idea? That's really cool.
It it's one of those things that I'm not really sure, and
Yep.
it was on its way to being published before Dark Matter came out. It was already, the book was on its way out, and it also had some similarities to Red Rising, so much so that because Pierce and I were with the same publisher, they actually came to me and asked me, because originally in Generations trilogy, all of the kids have a tattoo on their forehead. There's a circle tattoo of these 6 different symbols, which eventually they turn to realize it's a caste-based system. So even though they don't know the caste-based system, they were expected to follow certain societal roles, some of which were indentured servants, some of which were very rich, some of which were military. It was originally gemstones in their forehead with different colors, and the colors identified everything. So because when it was coming out and they already knew Red Rising was going to be a big deal, that they actually came to say, can you change these colors to anything else? Because we had another thing that's very similar. And I think I had met Pierce at a con or something like that. I was like, yeah, I think I can make that work. So we changed that and it worked out pretty well, the change of it. But the general idea was, what would it be like to wake up in a coffin? So there's definitely a Kill Bill kind of line to it, but from a very different perspective. And usually when I get these ideas, I get several things that glom together to get one unique idea. What if someone wakes up in a coffin? What if it's not actually a coffin? What if they have no idea why they're there? And then, as I had nephews and nieces who were all through their various stages of growth at the time, ranging in age from, I think, 6 to 16, it got me thinking about the amount of personal development that happens to us from, say, the 5th grade all the way up to our senior year. And part of that is you go through physiological and hormonal changes. You go from everybody plays together and gets along. We're all kind of hanging out doing the same thing. And then somewhere around junior high and early in high school, cliques start to form, castes start to form. Some people become jocks, some people become nerds. And there's all this inner tension and tribalism that happens in the school. You go from people you played on the playground with in grade school all your life, and now you can't stand each other when you're both 15. So the concept was why was that, and what would happen if you went from 12 mentally, all of a sudden now you fast forward to 18 with all the hormonal changes and all the anger and all the different urges and all the drama and over emotional things that go on without that 6 years or 7 years to put it all in perspective. It's this whiplash encounter, and I thought that would be a really cool thing to do, because when the characters in the Generations trilogy start to feel these things like this sudden burst of rage, they have no idea what's going on. So they are now, almost fully grown adults, strong, capable, dangerous, and they have no context to put these out of control emotions into place. So that makes for some very shocking actions by the people, by the characters. It makes for a lot of regret when they do a thing. They look back like, why did I do that? And there's no one there to tell them because there are no grown-ups. So, and that all combined with Lord of the Flies. Lord of the Flies is one of my favorite books. And Lord of the Flies was, what if a bunch of 12-year-olds get stranded on an island? What happens to them with no parental supervision and no cultural context? I just took that concept, added in the whole, puberty emotional thing on top of it, and let it run from there. And eventually the Generations trilogy runs into the big bad, which are these people called grown-ups. And their grown-ups are not what you would expect. And you start to find out why they have been abandoned and isolated.
That's really awesome. That sounds very interesting. My favorite Pierce Brown story is my own because I met Pierce at the Poison Pen right when Red Rising was just coming out. I think it was literally like I couldn't even find the book, right? Like I was waiting and I knew he was going to be there, and they had given a list. He was there with Kevin Hearn. I met Brandon Sanderson, Brian McCullen. Like Way of Kings had just come out. Patrick Rothfuss had just was there with In the Name of the Wind. None of those 3 books, or 4 really, with the Gunpowder Major, Brian McCullen, had really like been out for more than like 3.5 weeks, I think. And I'm going and I get over to Pierce. He's next to Michael J. Sullivan, I remember. And I was like, oh man, like Romans in space, this sounds incredible. And Pierce literally looks at me and goes, yeah, I hope to sell a few. Like, it's so funny, right? Is like I went to that was like the first time I ever met traditional authors in person, and also, or like let alone anywhere. But then on that day, I also met a bunch of indie authors too, and these guys, everybody was just having such a great time. And I just thought that was funny that like all those people that were there, even I met Django Wexler was there too. Like it's funny to see where people started, and then where people are now. Like 11 years later, it's crazy. So it really goes to show you, right, that when you're putting in the work, a lot of good stuff happens. So it's really fun. But that's really cool. Sorry, go ahead.
He's a friend of mine. We actually met through books.
That's
His editor,
awesome.
I was at a San Diego Comic-Con, and his editor approached me and said, "Hey, I've got this book. I think it's right up your alley. Would you consider reading this for a blurb?" And this is interesting how the market works. So at
Yeah.
that time, I'm a New York Times bestseller. I'm doing okay, doing good, and writing full time, very happy. And like I was at this level, and Pierce was just starting out. And read the book, loved it, was able to give the first cover blurb for Red Rising. And I was just like, oh, this guy seems super cool. I'm gonna help him out. And Pierce and I click 'cause Pierce is another high school football player. So we sort of hit it off right away. And then when it ascended, now Pierce is way up here, and I'm, still kind of where I was, and it's great. And now Pierce has been kind enough; he graced me with a cover blurb for Alive, which is book one of the Generations trilogy, and he also gave me a cover blurb for The Crypt, which is book one of the Crypt series. So he's hard at work working on that next Red Rising book, and he's sort of taken himself out of society to focus and get it done. And I'm sure it'll be awesome. But if anybody out there is a Red Rising a fan, he is as cool of a dude as you think he is. He's a great guy.
Yeah, it was super fun. I love when people are really awesome to me in person. I do martial arts. I used to have a MMA team and stuff. I used to train people in mixed martial arts, and some people I met from the UFC or Bellator or whatever, and some of the other ones back like WXC or whatever it was back when Uriah Faber did it and stuff. I met him. He was amazing. But some people were really cool. Some people not so much. But like so far. I'll be honest, I haven't met an author yet who has not just been super friendly, super awesome. So I've been really blessed. I know a few people that have, met some people that aren't, but I always love when people are actually, cool when you meet them and as cool as they seem. So that's really cool. My best friend, actually, I introduced him to Red Rising. Literally, I think it was like within I checked back on for book club for Way of Kings, or maybe it was Words of Radiance, and he's like, "Yeah, remember that series?" I think he literally read everything or slash listened to it within maybe 11 days. He's like, "I loved it. It was like one of his favorites." So
Yeah, no, all those people you mentioned, like Kevin Hearn is just the nicest guy you could ever meet. Absolutely delightful guy, former teacher. Wonderful. Django is great. Sullivans are awesome. So all those people are really fun. We sit all day in our office all by ourselves for months on end. And then you get that 1 or 2 weeks or go to a con and you get to hang out with people who are all going through the same thing. It is delightful. So authors by and large are great. But I wanted to mention in the Galactic Football League series, there's 6 novels right now and 6 novellas. One of the novellas is called Title Fight, and that is sci-fi MMA. And that's the one you should start with. If you know MMA, I think you will get a big kick out of it.
oh, that's awesome. Well, I'm gonna have to go buy that as soon as we get done. That's like I love that movie with Hugh Jackman, Real Steel, where they had like the robots and stuff. It was just awesome. So that's super cool. I didn't realize you had that many novellas there too. So I got some buy-in to do this month. I get my Kindle card birthday gift from my family, my wife. So
Well, the Rookie actually is free on Kindle right now, and it's a weird story. We put it up free as a promotion somewhere. We can't find where that is. And Amazon always scans for the lowest cost book and matches it. So now the Rookie has been free for Kindle for about 5 years. And my business partner slash wife and I cannot figure out why that is. We'd like to bump it up to 99 cents. So anybody listening to this, go to scottsigler.com/the rookie. You can grab book one of the Galactic Football League series for free on Kindle and read it and see if you like it. But we're fine because we know most of you are going to buy all the rest of the books. I just to that first book, and then we get paid after that.
yeah, it's still interesting though. That's very interesting that that's how it goes. That's weird. I did notice I had a friend, I asked him that and he said he finally was able to figure out where his was or something because he's like, dude, He goes, I just, like current prices and stuff. I'm like, I get it. He's like, yeah. So he went back somewhere and dug deep and was able to find his erased to 99 cents. He goes, dude, it took me like 6 months. I'm like, that's wild to think about that, but that's crazy. Yeah, quite a few there though. So that's my thing is I read one and then I'm like, I really like this. And my wife teases me all the time, but I'll just buy the rest of them. She's like, you're probably not going to read them for a while. But I usually go through like 5 or 6 authors where I do that, where I like buy everything and then I just kind of, I'm a binge reader and watcher. It's like at least it's healthier than eating, right?
I do that too, and don't always finish the series, but I frankly don't care because if I know in depth the work that goes into writing that first book in a series, and like I'll buy book one, I'll just buy the whole series, and if I don't get to it, I don't care because that's all little tips of the hat to the author. And it all helps the algorithm too, which is a big thing. So yeah, I will buy the series carte blanche and just be done with it. If I get through it, great. If I don't, that's okay too.
Yeah, my wife, she's like, you're just when I podcast and stuff, or when I buy books, I'm like, I gotta buy this book. It's a friend of mine. She's like, you say that about every single fantasy and sci-fi author, some horror and historical fiction. I'm like, I know them, and I like pull them up on Facebook. I'm like, I know Scott on Facebook. I gotta buy his book. She's like, define the word friend. Like I said, well, I'm trying to be a good friend, so I totally agree there.
Like horror and historical fiction. So I know we're probably going to talk about books at the end, but I have a book coming out March 24th, 2026 called Warpath. It is set in 1760. So it's colonial North America, pre-Revolutionary War. And there was a special forces group called Rogers Rangers back then. Pretty much the first special forces group, also an integrated group. It wasn't just
Yep.
white dudes, other people in it as well. And it is that group changed the face of warfare forever. Modern guerrilla warfare with firearms is largely invented by that group. And the US Rangers today still have the mantra of Robert Rogers, who invented the Rogers Rangers. They still teach it, all these years later. That is a horror story where a group of Rogers Rangers have to travel down to Western Kentucky when there wasn't a Western Kentucky, and Kentucky didn't even have a European settlement of any kind in 1760. It was nothing but forest and what Europeans would call straight wilderness. And of course, there were Native American tribes there. I have invented or created a new tribe because I love Western European fantasy fiction, George R. R. Martin, Joe Abercrombie. Read all that stuff, and I've read here is a newly created Western European feudal culture, and they build the whole thing, and it's wonderful. I haven't read a lot where people do that with other cultures. So, being an American in North America, I create this whole North American culture, and things have gone horribly wrong there. And there is this entity that is released that is incredibly violent and very murderous. And our rangers come down to this area and find themselves immersed in a really old school horror story. And it's kind of if you like Predator or Aliens, but can imagine a supernatural force involved in that, then you will dig this book. And the Rogers Rangers part is very historically accurate. I spoke with people who are, scholars on that subject. I worked with a Special Forces Green Beret who was taught all of that stuff and served 3 tours in Desert Storm, a gentleman named Chris Grawl. And so working with all of these people to make it as realistic as we could, it's really cool. I do have to say one thing about it though. It's so different back then that I had to fight with my editors at Titan because they're like, okay, well, that guy's shot. They're going to do first aid on that and boil bandages and things. I'm like, germ theory hadn't been invented. They had no idea where infection came from. No, people did not dress wounds back then. So having to make it as real as possible. There's like a 5-page forward in the front of the book where I big letters say, please read this so that you can understand like dynamite hasn't been invented. First aid hasn't been invented. And you have to know all that going into the book to understand how they go through it. But it's really dark supernatural horror and super fun.
No, super cool. Again, I love those type of conglomerations there of historical fiction, horror, sci-fi, those kind of things. Yeah, I like those are definitely up my alley. That's what I do too. Like I teach history, but it's like I don't like to do straight historical fiction. I like to do like I have an urban fantasy series that's coming out, and I have I do a lot of historical things there. But I don't know. I like also like to have fun, so put in the fantastical elements there. I was actually doing a lot of research, I guess I can't say right now yet, but on a particular entity or mythological creature of North American, Native American culture. And yeah, so I was like trying to pick last night. I was like, there's too many good things, right? I was like, I just need one beginning chapter, one, monster or whatever you want to call them. And I was like, how do I pick? So I got it narrowed down to like 8, but I'm like, because I have good ideas with this one. I have good ideas with this one, and it gets hard at times, right, to put in the cool stuff. And it's funny though that you mentioned that though, because I do know quite a few historical fiction readers that are history teachers that if you put that they were doing first aid at that time, they would stop reading the book, like they would DNF it. You know what I mean? Like,
Right. Well, if it sounds like a series to me. You could pull the Jonathan Mayberry angle, and every book is a different monster, a different
yeah,
mythological creature. Go at it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I have I was teaching 2 years ago, and I got right before my son was born, and I was like really upset because there's the Lost Roman Legion, right? And I talked to like Jeffrey Haskell about this before we did our interview a couple years ago, and it drove me nuts. This guy came out with a paper. He said like for years they're like, oh, the Lost Legion, like was it the Picts? Like where'd they go, right? And they said that they found a receipt from like Spain or something like Hispania, and they think that maybe they just like disbanded from there or something. But I was like, that's a weird thing because you get one receipt that somebody, I'm like, well, but there's no evidence that they actually went from right the UK and then went there. So I was like, that's a dumb explanation. And my history friend and I, another teacher, we were like debating it, right? And I was like, screw that. I was like, that's stupid. And for some reason, all of a sudden, I was like, I'm gonna put it with zombies because that's why no one's ever found their bodies and stuff, right? And he's like, God, that's fun. I was like, yeah. And I just had like a lot of fun with it. So I kind of like turning that crew of survivors into like ancient monster hunters, and I combined it with like my modern day like urban fantasy stuff. But my friend, he's like, you just love combining history with like urban fantasy or sci-fi. I'm like, because it's just more fun, like it's a little break. It's like what but as a history person, but then it's like a break, and you get to have those fantastical elements. And there's just so many cool, like you've already mentioned, right? Like I actually just found out about those guys recently, that group. A friend just actually sent me an article probably about 6 months ago. He's like, oh, you like military history and stuff like that, and he like handed it to me, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. I'd never heard about them up till that point. So gonna have to buy Warpath 2. Oh no, Scott, I'm sure you're really upset about that. So definitely gonna be my book.
Job is to take your money and stay up all night so you go to work very tired and angry with me. That's what I do for a
Well, if I'm staying up all night, I'll be honest with you, Scott, I'm not going to be angry because I love those books and those times where I'm like in the zone. And my wife came in about a week ago, and I was like, I was right there with a book, and yeah, she was like, "You're just not going to bed till you finish, right?" I was like, I absolutely will not. I think I went to bed at 12:45 the next day. She's like, "This was stupid, wasn't it?" I was like, "It was dumb," but I said I have no regrets. So no regrets, is like I like to say. So.
good.
So what are your sun symbol books about, and what were your inspiration for them? Sounds
Uh,
awesome.
Books are, it's a duology right now. It's Earth Core and Mount Fitzroy. And Earth Core is my biggest selling book, bar none. It is blown up on Audible. Ray Porter does the narration on Audible. He's the man who narrated Hail Mary. He was the 2015 Audible Narrator of the Year. He's a big deal. It was Darkseid and the Justice League, and an absolute prince of a guy, just a great guy. But he's got that voice that's just amazing. He also narrates all of Jonathan Mayberry's work. So Earth Core is it's I try to explain these things without giving away the spoilers. But in a nutshell, what you get is a mining company that is very backbiting and ladder climbing, and it's kind of succession. Everybody's out to get each other. They stumble upon a huge deposit of platinum located under a mountain in Utah in the Wawa Mountain Range that is so big, if it was all to be mined at once, it would make platinum as valuable as tin. So it's just because it's all supply and demand. But platinum has all of these amazing industrial properties to it. It's like high temperature, lack of corrosion. I won't get into it now. There's a lot of things that it does, and it's very much an in-demand metal. So they know if they can get this deposit locked up, they're going to be as powerful as like the De Beers company with diamonds in South, just locked up the whole supply. The problem is this deposit's 3 miles underground. It's deeper than anything has ever been dug. And that's the geothermal temperatures down there are so hot, like rocks will burn your bare skin instantly. It's that hot down there. It's a hellish, almost impossible survival environment. So it's a bit of a Douglas Preston, Lincoln Child style book. You get to see them come up with a tech to drill down there, see them come up with a survival tech to let the workers live long enough. And of course, once they get down there, they find out there's already something there living in a place where nothing should be living. There's an extremophile involved, and the shit hits the fan, and it becomes a survival last man standing story. Again, I'm hugely influenced by Aliens and Alien. So if you are a fan of Alien or Relic or books of that category, Earth right up your alley. And Mount Fitzroy, trying to avoid the spoilers again. Mount Fitzroy picks up where Earth Core leaves off, which will be hard to believe when you get to the end of Earth Core. You'll be like, there's nothing could go anywhere from here. The destruction is so cataclysmic. How could you possibly continue the story? That's what I do for a living. So we continue the story, and it is a continuation. It winds up being even bigger than Earth Core. It's a huge book. It's like 230,000 words. It's a massive story. Also narrated by Ray Porter, and one of the best values you're going to find on Audible, because you get 1 credit and it's 24 plus hours of listening. So sci-fi, possibly monsters, but I won't give away what's going on down there. A lot of internecine fighting and backbiting, and definitely a last man standing, and some really, really violent scenes and some very disturbing, violent human characters as well.
That's awesome. I always love like especially the original, like The Thing, like that was just one of the best things I've ever, experienced. So couldn't sleep for a week, but
Kurt Russell wasn't really hip on the one from the 90s, I think, but it was a good movie unto itself.
yeah.
But Kurt Russell, The Thing, is another, just that whole era of cinema influences my work far more than any other author, anything. I'd say the only author that really influences my work right now is Joe Abercrombie. I'm just a giant fan of the grimdark and the way he puts things together in his characterization. So I'll read that and be like, that's good, make a note. That's good, make a note. But by and large, overall storytelling structure, it's James Cameron. That's where it all comes from. Terminator, The Thing, Alien, Aliens, that whole era, Predator, of course, that whole era of movies and sci-fi horror movies. I grew up watching that stuff, and you can pick out lines from all of those movies. So if you've watched all those flicks and you've watched them on repeat and you can quote dialogue, you're going to get to see the Easter eggs where I put that dialogue in context in my story. And sometimes these lines just pop up out of nowhere. Like at some point, you're going to find we're going to need a bigger boat in one of my stories. And if you're like, I know that one, it's very fun. But you don't need to watch those movies to follow the books at all.
That's fun though. Have you, I'm just curious, are you excited about the new Alien TV show for FX that's coming out on the 12th?
Super
Looks
excited.
awesome to me.
Very good. I've not been a big fan of the I see everything that comes out, but it's a lot like Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
The Star Wars movies, they're not made for guys like me. They're not made for dudes in their 50s, right? They're still aiming at a particular demographic. So I don't really track with those as much as when I saw Star Wars when I was like, what, 12? It's a different thing. The Aliens franchise is a little more difficult for them to keep going. I got the privilege of writing a canonical Aliens novel, Aliens Phalanx. So again, if you like military history, Aliens Phalanx is a big one, because that is an alien story where the whole plot doesn't revolve around who's going to be the last person to the shuttle and escape the ship or get off the planet. In Aliens Phalanx, you're dealing with a pre-industrial human culture. There is no shuttle. There is no ship. These aliens, which they call demons, are loose on the planet and gradually exterminating the humans on this planet. And we're talking sword and shield and spear is the highest level of technology the humans have, and they have to figure out a way to survive. So I got that because I'm I got the opportunity to write that because I'm deeply immersed in the aliens lore and the aliens culture. I got to write a story called Bug Hunt, Dangerous Prey, which is in Jonathan Mayberry Aliens anthology called Bug Hunt. And so far, I'm the only person to write from the aliens, the xenomorphs point of view. So Dangerous Prey is you're in the alien's head, not in the human's head. It flips around. It's great. So, and I've watched Aliens, I think 127 times now at this point. I can quote almost the whole movie. So I'm in love with this franchise. It's my favorite thing that's ever been made. So as I watch different creators come in and do different things with it, sometimes it gets a little frustrating because at one point 20th Century Fox didn't care. They just wanted a movie out there. They're not keeping track of the continuity or the milieu. They're just letting people go do whatever they want. So you wind up with some very different stories that actually have, xenomorphs in them. I think the best thing I've seen in a long time is Romulus. It's a great movie. I loved it. It's number 3 in the franchise for me. Still had to do a lot of heavy lifting to try and incorporate Prometheus, to try and incorporate elements of Covenant, things that are just don't really are a separate franchise. Aliens, Prometheus, Covenant, those are not the same. They're they're different franchises entirely. They just happen to have these scary things in them. But from what I've read, Noah Wyle with the TV series coming out, it's aliens, and that's it. They're picking up from there. So I did the same thing when I wrote Aliens Phalanx. I'm like, aliens. I got a hat tip to Covenant, but none of the more crazy biology. Because for me, the life cycle is very specific and very set. So I follow that in Phalanx. And that's why I'm excited, because it looks like Noah Wile's very focused on the original source material. And so as a diehard fan of 40 years, I'm super pumped. I'm going to give it a lot of leeway because you got to let people do their thing. It's hard to create things like this, and you can't just remake a thing from what it was. So I'm pretty pumped. We'll see how it goes. But August 12th, which is it's 5 days away. So yes, I'm pumped to watch it.
I agree with you. I thought first of all, I just passed Aliens Phalanx the other day, so if I had seen that you had written that, I would have picked it up. So I picked up a different one actually. I discovered them about 6 months ago. I was like, I don't know why I missed them. Maybe I wasn't. I think where they put the Aliens books here, it's a weird part of the shelf in Sci-Fi, if that makes sense. So, and we didn't have that many, and all of a sudden they started to replenish, I've noticed. So at first we only had the Aliens, movie, books essentially, right? Like 1, 2 and stuff. And then maybe every once in a while they had Aliens versus Predator, the movie, but the book. So all of a sudden I noticed about 6 months ago, our Barnes and Noble got a huge section, and then they moved it, and there's those books, but now there's the other ones. And I was like, what are these? So I started researching, and I bought quite a few of them. I'm about to start going through them this fall. So now that I know that that's yours, I'll have to go back and get that one. So because I was like, I love these movies. I love the aliens just in general. I love Predators and those kind of things. I'm actually really excited for. I saw Superman last week. I just, for the first time, saw the Predator Legacy trailer, which does look interesting. Looks really good. Looks like a good sci-fi movie, if I could say so myself. I'm curious. Again, I think it's the same thing as Alien personally, right? Like sometimes people, they change and stuff. So I like some changes, others not so much. But I am really excited for both of them just to kind of see, what are they doing with the source material and kind of where they go from there. But
Putting out a new movie or a TV show is a massive gamble. Even Predator Prey was probably, I'm gonna guess that was a $60 million movie, somewhere in that ballpark. And that's on the low end for these sci-fi epics. So when people make these things, it's a massive gamble. Hundreds of jobs are on the line if it doesn't do well. Even if it goes straight to streaming, it still has to perform at a certain level. So you have to please many masters, right? Noah Wile's got to please a whole bunch of different masters, all the people first strings, and with the check mark, yes, they have to cater that to everybody, make everybody as happy as they can, knowing they won't please everybody and still please the fans. When you get to write a book like the Alex White Aliens books, they get to write a very specific section. And by and large, the publisher's there with you to be like, great, let's nail down what this is about, how far you can go. And then your job as a storyteller, you go tell the story. So a novel is a risk for a company, but it's a much smaller risk. So you get a little bit more leeway and creativity to tell a proper, complete story. The problem with the movie thing is a movie can be in the middle of shooting and some executive will come in and like, I don't like this. I want to change this. And you got to be like, we've already spent $20 million and now you want to invalidate 5 million of it. It's really, really hard to do. So when I see aliens shows, when I see movies and TV that aren't that great, my wife has a figure of speech. She's like, well, that's better than any movie I ever made because we've never made a movie. So we just enjoy it for what it's worth. I do get mad though. I'm a fanboy for aliens, so it's not right. I get all fussy. But
Well, there was that one, right, with the early 2000s, right, where they were on like the other world, right, and like Lawrence Fishburne was like one of the survivors or whatever. Oh man, it's just rewatch. I was about to rewatch it actually like 2 weeks ago. Um, That's gonna really bug me now. But that one actually, I anybody that I've known who saw it was like, man, this movie was like like amazing, and I'm like, yeah, it's weird, but I think like it was like one of those things like when it came out and stuff. I don't know,
yeah,
it was interesting. I think it was The Predator, maybe.
yeah, it might be the Predator.
Yeah, The Predator, I think is what it was. Yeah, but it was like, yeah, oh, Topher Grace was in it, and he
Yeah,
was like crazy.
great. Yeah, that was a fun movie. But
Yeah.
I'm glad we're going back to the original source material because Hollywood has this incurable disease that they always have to up level. You don't need to up level Predator.
Yeah.
When Predators comes out and now there's a giant predator that hunts smaller predators, like I get where they're going with that story. That could have been like movie 5 or 6. You don't need to just splash out that big right out of the gate. You can tell a great predator story using the existing race that they have. It's like watching a Marvel or Avengers movie. Like, why does it always have to be the end of the universe, bro? Is that like you've already gone so far? You can't come back down and tell a more concise story. But that's a very difficult job. Making movies is real hard.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, well, that's awesome. Well, I just, since you, like, those last couple of things you said, I totally agree, but that's also why I was so excited to figure out that there were actually, Predator and Alien, books that weren't just, renditions of, like a little bit thicker than the movies. I was like, oh my gosh, like I could actually get exactly what I want out of these books. So I'm like so excited to dive in. I think I bought like three different ones so far with like gift cards and stuff. So I'm actually trying to get to my current reads so I can start getting it back into that universe. But
Tim Wagner's books are great. Weston Oak's book is great. The Predator, I think it's the Predator Rage War, is a 3-book, and I've torn through them all. It's great when you get seasoned storytellers who know how to write a novel or know how to write a trilogy and bring it all together. And then you set that on the bedrock of the lore foundation of these existing franchises. You get a lot of great entertaining books out of that.
I say Tim Wagner is one of my favorite. Like he had like the Eberron books. Oh my gosh, he actually have two of his. I have to two trilogies. I read the first two books, and then I was like waiting for them to come out way back in the day, and then they came out, and that's like Eberron was done. So I actually have to go back to finish both of those trilogies. But he's like definitely one of my favorites from like the mid 2000s.
He's another great guy. I was just on a panel with him at San Diego Comic-Con, and yeah, he excellent dude, good writer, solid.
Oh, actually, just because you mentioned it, what panel was that? Because I saw, somewhere on your social media had that, but I was just curious.
Well, the panel I put on social media was a spotlight panel on me. It was a special guest this year. I was very lucky
That's
and
cool.
honored, and I got to do a panel with Jonathan Mayberry asking me questions and in conversation, and Ray Porter came up as well. And Ray Porter is the narrator for the Crypt Book One Shakedown, which is hard sci-fi horror. It's a very horrifying story, and he's also going to narrate book 2, Void Strike, which will be out near the end of the year. And that series is, I'm a big fan of World War II movies and fiction, and the concept of the submarine in space has been done a bunch. Like Jeffrey Haskell has done it. It's very common, but in real physics, that is something that cannot possibly happen with what we know about physics, black body radiation, and a lot of other things, and just so much distance and coldness in space, you're going to see things coming no matter what you do. So I tried to come up with a concept. Okay, well, what if there's a found object, an alien vessel that is derelict, there's no one in it, but a human government finds it and realizes this vessel can slip into another dimension, travel to a point, and come back out. These are overlapping stacked dimensions. So the basic travel's roughly the same. It's just you are in a different plane of reality and you cannot be detected. Submarine in space. Where the Crypt series gets different is this ship is called the PUV James Keeling, and it has gone on secret missions. Nobody knows about it. It's whispered about in the military, but it's gone on missions, and the mortality rate is rumored to be 70 to 80%. So the people who sleep on the ship do not do well. As word creeps out, as gossip creeps out, nobody knows what the ship is. You just know you do not want to be on it. So anybody whose daddy's an admiral, or you've got a great career track, or you know a politician, or you're rich or anything like that, you pull strings so you don't get assigned to the Crypt. So the Crypt doesn't get the best of the best. It gets people who are convicted of cowardice in combat, or murder, or assault, or rape, or fraud, or all of these different things, because what they tell you is like, well, you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison or be executed, or you can serve on this ship for 2 years and your record will be expunged. So you get the worst of the worst in this crew because they have to send the ship out because it's the only ship that can perform missions in enemy territory. The problem is when they go into this alternate dimension, it makes the crew hallucinate. It makes the crew psychotic. There's things going on inside the ship that you don't know if they're real or not, and the characters don't know if they're real. It becomes the most violent place in the universe while they are traveling to do a very dangerous military mission. And then if they survive that, they have to travel back again. And this alternate dimension is a place called the Mud. Things look different, feel different. There's things going on in there that they're not sure what they are. So there's sort of a Cthulhu-esque element to going to this other place. So it's a submarine in space. I call it like Australia in space. There's a couple movies. The Devil's Brigade is a movie I heavily based the concept off of. The Dirty Dozen, things like that. And just putting that in a sci-fi context. And the last thing I'll say about it is Star Wars gets shit on a lot because it's space, yet all the navies line up point. And that's not how space works. You know, Babylon 5 and The Expanse really did a much better job of trying to show how crazy space combat with no center of gravity, it's bonkers. There is no up, there is no down, left, right. It's all over the place. So in the Crypt series, there's a reason that ships have to get very close. There's no killing a ship at 10 light years away. There's no light speed torpedoes because the ships all generate this zone of interference around them. So if you're looking at a ship from 50 kilometers away, it looks like the size of the moon. You have no idea what you're actually shooting at. It's different realities popping in and out, different instances. It's bonkers. As you get closer, that illusion starts to shrink. And as you get very close, you start to see one fuzzy ship, which means you've got to close in. And that zone of interference, microwaves, masers, lasers, anything you can shoot from a great distance very fast, none of it's going to work because of the interference will defray that. The only thing that works is artillery, old school bullets, old school torpedoes. So you got to close in like a World War II battle, and the ships are all at crazy different angles. But you basically got to see the whites of their eyes because targeting computers don't work. No computers work when these zones of interference go. So inside the Keeling, it's all this World War II-esque stuff. It's all gears and pulleys and levers. So it's a ship that can travel faster than the speed of light and do all these great things. But inside, it sort of harkens back to a World War II submarine. Cramped, sweaty, claustrophobic. You're around the worst, most violent people you can think of, and you still got to perform that mission. And then by getting everybody close together, we're allowed to have my version of Space Marines, which is called Raiders, which is what Raiders actually were way back in the Age of Sail. Their job was to go get on another ship. So you've got these heavily armed guys in suits who can cross the gap, try and take over another ship physically. It's super fun. It's really brutal horror. And as the series progresses, the horror is going to get more and more batshit crazy. So by the end of book 2, things are really nuts. And as book 3 starts, it's starting to get a little bit wild. But hopefully by then, you know all the characters that have lived and you're into it as they start to go into a different slice of hell.
That sounds awesome. I was gonna say, I think we talked about most current projects, right, that you have. I just want to make sure that we got most of them because I know we did talk about Infected earlier. I thought maybe so just to go over, so we talked about Warpath, Crypt Book 2, right? It's coming out later this year.
Yep.
Did we talk about that one yet?
The Crypt Book 2?
Yeah.
Well, Crypt Book 1 available now, scottsigler.com/the crypt. Links to Audible, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all of those places. Crypt Book 2, we don't have a publication date for it yet, but all of my work involves what I call what the fuck moments. My goal is to bring the reader in. You think you know what's going on, and then all of a sudden you hit a wall. You're like, what the fuck just happened? And you're right there with the characters because they're asking the same question. So it's hard to tease the Crypt Book 2, which is called Void Strike, without giving spoilers for Book 1. So
Okay.
I would say go if you like the idea of military sci-fi or sci-fi horror, you're going to love it. Go get Book 1, and then Book 2 will be out later in 2025. Warpath out March 24th, 2026. The Infected trilogy is finished. Generations trilogy is finished. Galactic Football League, 6 novels, 6 novellas out right now. You start with The Rookie, scottsigler.com/The Rookie. And if Book 7 will either be out at the tail end of 2025 or probably in Q1 of 2026. And then the last one, the urban fantasy paranormal monster hunter one, which is very crass, a lot of foul humor, and a lot of monster hunters that are alcoholics and drug addicts because they have to deal with what they're going out after all the time. That series, Book 1 is out, scottsigler.com/slay, and Book 2 will be out towards the end of 2025, ebook, audiobook, and hardcover. I do the narration for those audiobooks. And we're finishing up season 3 in the podcast. We finish the season, we put it into production as a book. So Book 2 will be out end of 2025. Book 3 and 4 will probably be out in 2026, as well as Crypt Book 3 and 4, probably 2026. I got a lot of work to do.
You know that feeling. All right. Well, I'm curious with this question before we wrap up here. What book has been the most challenging for you to write so far, and why?
A lot of the books, I try and be sort of egalitarian in who the villains are and who the protagonists are and who the victims are. So there are horror elements in my books that involve kids because when shit hits the fan, kids are going to get in as much trouble as the grown-ups. So writing some of those scenes and plotline through can be very difficult. In the Infected trilogy, Book 3, the main antagonist is a 12-year-old girl, and watching what changes for her so that she is justifying easily all of the things she's doing to people. That was a little dark. It's kind of squicky to write that, but trying to present an honest story like that is tough. Oddly, the biggest challenge has been Warpath and A Light Generations trilogy, because they're so out of our context of time that I phrases like, she knocked that one out of the park. That's the hottest stove. That's the hottest pot on the stove. All the phrases we use every day that we don't think about as a normal part of our communication. I can't use those because they don't apply in the Generations trilogy. They're from a different time than we are in. In Warpath, that was really, really difficult to try and write in a modern voice, but with no modern cues, and doing so in a way that doesn't make your characters look stupid. There's so many things that we have this body of knowledge in our culture that when you watch a character not do a thing that a 10-year-old knows how to do in America, that's difficult and jarring for the reader. So the challenge of making that kind of mesh was a really, really hard thing to do. I've noticed that, like I said, I'm a big fan of Abercrombie's work. He's sort of writing the dawning of the industrial age from a feudal structure, but a lot of modern things, modern phrases are creeping into his work. So I don't know if they've always been there or he's sort of lowering the gates on it. He's like, yeah, this is the way we talk. Like somebody saying like, well, that just happened. People did not say that, in 1600s, things along those lines. So I see some of my contemporaries kind of easing their restrictions because the goal as a writer is to write with clarity and communicate emotion. So if you use modern phrases for that, not giving myself the leeway of using any modern phrases whatsoever was difficult for Warpath. And also cursing. I did research on cursing. And when you go back to 1760, people just did not curse as much. Telling someone to go to hell, that was a big deal. Like, I'm trying to write these grizzled, hardcore, lifetime soldiers that literally get paid to bring back Native American scalps. That's part of what Rogers Rangers and colonial soldiers did. It was horrible. It was terrible, but that was the reality of being those soldiers. So you would think those guys would be cursing up a storm, and it's just not the way it was. And getting into the history of cursing, which there's a couple of fun books out there about that. Most of what we know as modern day swearing simply did not exist. Like they were just different ways of saying things. So trying to do that, trying to make it historically accurate, but also not shortchanging the reader that these characters don't come across as prim and proper churchgoers. That was real. Those were the biggest challenges I've had in my writing, which was not using modern phrases, but still telling the right story.
I feel like I totally understand that. There's certain times, like I know people, they come up with for fantasy, right? They come up with, it's like not Earth, right? So then they're like, okay, I got to come up with my own, like they probably wouldn't have a clock, right? So then they come up with like a different word. I'm like, at times I find it difficult. I'm like, if I'm sitting there trying, I'm like, are they going to say a clock for fantasy? At least I'm like, I'm just not even going to mention it, right? It's like I'm going to be like timepiece or something like that. So I think a lot of those times, because you find some people who are okay, right, with Abercrombie saying that, but then other people aren't going to be, right? So that's definitely something you have to worry about, right? Because sometimes people DNF because of that, or they won't continue a book, if that's the case. So I am that way with my prequel novella series for my urban fantasies. I have an ex-Marine, so I have my friend J.R. Wise. Once I'm fully ready, he's going to take a look at that. I told him I was like, I'll give you free books for life for this character because I got to make sure that he's good for the Marines. I got some veteran Army female authors that are helping me write one of the other main characters who's a ex-Army officer herself. And, so I'm like, got to make sure I get the jargon right? I said soldier, and someone's like, I'm not a soldier, I'm a Marine. And I'm like, damn, like I got yelled at in my beta or my alpha notes. And I was like, that's fair, so I definitely can understand that. Sometimes doing that is just, it's hard, right? You got to really find people that know what they're doing.
Got to do that. Like the Crip series, I have a colonel, retired Air Force colonel. I have the gentleman I told you, Chris Grawl, who's also the author of a book called Trigger Guard, which is a writer's guide to firearms. It's fantastic. I recommend everybody who's a writer pick that one up. And I have a submarine Navy commander who served on the boomers. And I have a guy I went to high school with and played football with, still one of my buddies, who was a Marine who served in Somalia and Ethiopia and has gone through some difficult crap. So I've got people from all four of the services, no Space Guard yet and no Coast Guard, putting everything in front of them. And it's a big ask. I'm like, hey, can you guys read this first? Can you read this outline? Can you give me ideas for the outline, what they do? Can you read the first draft? Can you read the second draft? Okay, here's the third part that you corrected, because trying to get that stuff right is very difficult. I consider it primary responsibility of any writer who's going to write from the military point of view. You've got people who have served and they got it down cold. I have never served. So when I'm writing military fiction, even though it's 600 years in the future with a fictitious government and a fictitious military structure, I still want to make sure that the people who have served don't get yeeted out of the story and DNF because, you called the raider, you called him a soldier, or you said, yeah, he's a former raider. If you call somebody a former Marine, that does not go over well, doesn't. Getting that stuff right is really, really important. But the other part of that work you're putting in now is when you do get it right, because so many people don't put in the wrench time to get it right, You have a combat veteran read your work and be like, that all smelled real to me. They share it all over the place because they get so frustrated. They're like, dude, this stuff isn't complicated. Just find a veteran and ask them. And every veteran I've ever asked is more than happy to participate and help out and give an enormous amount of time. They also want to make sure it's right. They also want their service and craft and skills and culture respected. So good on you for doing that. It makes a lot more work, but it makes for a better book.
Yeah, even of that. Well, it's like martial arts, like people will do something or they'll say something or whatever. I'm just like, and I used to study very in depth, like with martial arts history too. So somebody will do something, I'm like, that is just, it pulls me out, and I'm just like, I get frustrated. It's not to the level, right? It's very minuscule things, I would say, compared to what I've seen people do, unfortunately, with veteran stuff. But yeah, even those little things, I'm just like, oh, it's annoying. So I can only imagine how much, more annoying it is, right? Like I'm just doing little, practicing somewhere in a dojo or a school or something, right? But to like actually have given, your time, your service, your life, in years, right? And then to have people not have, I think it's fair to say, enough respect, right, to take time to do the research or to get people, right, to whether you want to call it sensitivity reading or whatever, but just to get somebody, to check that. I think that's the least you can do, particularly when it comes to veterans myself, right, is to get that stuff checked. So,
It's not necessarily an insult if a relatively new writer writes something in the military, because all writers have those moments like, oh, I've watched 100 movies. I know how this works. And then you've got somebody using an automatic handgun that clicks on empty 3 times, like little things like that. Sometimes you got to get that cold water thrown in your face to realize there's a whole separate culture here. And watching movies about a thing is not how those things actually work. So yes, taking a step back and trying to find people. But you learn as you go. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody assumes they know how these things work and find out they have no idea, and then you have to go back and go to work.
yeah. I was impressed. I agree with you. I had a bigger name author, I won't mention, but I had a bigger name author ask me about some martial arts history stuff, for a particular martial art for a story. And I was like, I was a script actually. And I was like, when he asked me a question, and he was like, and it was like, it's kind of I don't want to say because it's probably going to come out, relatively soon, but it was like, I was like, oh, good for you, right? For, even like a veteran author, you know what I mean? I was like, why are you asking me? But we're friends. And he's like, oh, I see you post a lot of martial arts stuff, a lot of martial arts history stuff. So I was just impressed that, he, branched out, and, he's like, oh my gosh, like after we got done talking, he's like, I'm so glad I talked to you because I led him to some other sources and stuff. And he was able, to write the rest of the script and to put it in. And I think the people were really impressed by it, it sounded like. But I was impressed that somebody who's, like in your league came down to me, was like, hey, I need some help with this. I was like, holy moly. So I thought the least I can do, is do the same thing, being down here. So I definitely think it's good to ask for help just in general. But
Fortunate enough to do this for a living, have been working at it for a while, and it's pretty rare to find authors that don't want to get some kind of help. Like Jonathan Mayberry has a gentleman named Ronald Coleman, who's his science advisor, and Ronald helps with all kinds of stuff. Mira Grant, the stuff, Sean, the stuff they write is so deeply biologically complicated. Like people have to go get, you're willing to go get help because you want it to be as right as it can be. And you often find that the easy answer is not as gripping as the more detailed answer. And the more detailed answer is going to be more thrilling and engaging for your reader. And then your job as a writer, you have to find that middle ground. Like you can't spend 17 pages writing about cellular reproduction in Infected, for example, which originally that is a story where an alien organism grows into your body, opens up your cells, rewrites your cells to make new organisms that wind up as these welts or growths on your body. Eventually, they tap into your nervous system and speak to you through your seventh cochlear nerve. So you're hearing real voices, but you're the only one who can hear them. So it's not an imaginary voice. They're talking to you and telling you to do all of these horrible, horrible things. But the beginning part of that, there's a scene where it starts out with an autopsy, and these bodies are decomposing really, really fast, faster than they should be. So I'm showing this autopsy scene, and the first draft I submitted to Penguin Random House, I'm going to guess 20, 25 pages, literally on justifying how all this stuff works for the science-minded people and the biology geeks. And you can't do that because it becomes boring to the average reader. So it's a matter of learning how it works, figuring out just the high level stuff, truncating it. So you're giving it tip of the hat, like, hey, biology PhD. I know what's going on. You know what's going on. I didn't screw this up. This is just the Cliff Notes version. And that lets people finish the books. It's a it's an intricate dance trying to find the difference between accuracy and storytelling, because your job is you're a storyteller. You're not a nonfiction educator. You're a story writing a book.
No, that's such a great point. All right, my friend. Do you have any other news, updates, current projects, anything like that you can share with us before we head out?
If you're interested in what I've talked about, I do a live stream every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. It is called Scott Sigler Slices, where I read new fiction for probably about 30 minutes. And then we switch over to another cast, which is called Deep Cuts, where we look at things and stuff in the world of entertainment, particularly writing, audiobook narrating, publishing business, and we get into some movies and things of that nature. And if you don't want to watch that, of course, that's on youtube.com/Scott Sigler, Twitch TV/Scott Sigler, Facebook.com/Scott Sigler. We also rip the audio from the fiction read, edit it, polish it up, make it real pretty. And that goes out in the podcast feed, which has been going for 20 years. And you can subscribe to that at scottsigler.com/subscribe, Spotify links, Apple podcast links, or just whatever podcast client you use. Go search for Scott Sigler. I've got multiple free novels on there, plus the ongoing story, which right now is Slay. And hopefully we can keep doing that and get it up to 30 years. But free stuff galore. Enjoy.
That's awesome. Well, feel free, Scott, send me any of your links. I'll put them in the description, like whatever it is. I would love when people go and click on those. Just want to remind everybody in our audience, it's so great. I've had a lot of people say, "Oh, I love this episode," or I love Scott's stuff. We just want to remind people, to not only click on the podcast, watch it, but also review Scott's podcast. That just helps everybody. Also, same thing when it's audio books. So, Kindle books, whether it's a movie, we've had people, we've had television shows been on here and stuff. So, anything that you can do to review those products, no matter where they're found, just helps everybody in the process. We've talked about audio narrators, artists, anybody, in the mix. It just helps everybody. So if you guys can continue to do that, that would be absolutely terrific. Scott, thank you so much. This has been absolutely awesome. Can't wait to have you on in the future and, talk about some more of your books and projects and stuff like that. But this has been absolutely amazing today, and I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me on. I really enjoyed it. And super nice to meet you, man.
Yeah, you too. Well, Scott, if you have anything else in the future, just let me know, and we'll have you back on again. I love when veterans, come back on. I always save spots for veterans of the podcast first, whether it's year 1 or year 5 or whatever it is. So if you have anything else, you can also just email it to me, or I'll throw it on my social media. We have a podcast group on Facebook. Sometimes people are like, "Hey, can you share this?" And I'll get it to wherever, social media or, newsletter, stuff like that. So send me anything you got at any point. I'll be more than happy to share it. But other than that, my friend, I hope you have a great rest of the day and good luck with everything.
Thank you. Hope you have a great day too.
You too, my friend. I'll see you later. Bye.